just picked these up last night. I got a couple of Traeger grills. These are the Big Techs, or the 34-inch. They're kind of the big dogs. I think these were actually made in about 2010 through about 2015. A couple of different models here. One of these has the stamped Traeger logo in the lid. The other one has the emblem that's on the outside. But both of them great grills, just haven't had a lot of attention paid to them, and they need a little bit of love. One of them was full of pellets and ash. The other one just kind of a general state of didn't pay as much attention as they needed to. But we're going to see what we can do to kind of bring these back, give them a little bit new life, and clean them up, show you how we do it. Here we go. You can see here we're a little bit rough. They obviously had a grease fire inside there. Looks like the burn pot on this is pretty good after we cleaned it out. Fired them up and they worked out great, but surface is just looking pretty rough on these guys, so that's why we need to have a little attention. This is one of the older ones. It's probably about a 2010 to 2012, has the Traeger badge on it. And then we move over to this guy, a little bit newer, and this is the one where you've got the stamped Traeger in the lid. So other than that, it's pretty much the same size, the same configuration. I think that's really the only difference between the two. A couple of things right off. You can see that the wheels on this guy were mounted on the inside. Don't give a lot of stability that way. And this guy, looks like we got kind of half and half. We got one done the correct way and the other one not so good. So we'll make sure and fix that also when we clean these up. Obviously, signs of a grease fire in here, where this one kind of got away from them. Biggest thing is just make sure you keep them clean, and they're going to last for a long time. Fired them both up, and the thermometers work on both of them, so we're in good shape there. And yeah, just need a little bit of TLC, and we'll bring these guys back to life and show you what we can do with them. So next step is we're going to take the hopper off, and in order to do that, the first thing that you're going to want to do is empty out your hopper. Otherwise you're going to have pellets all over the place. So make sure it's unplugged. There we go. Because you are going to put your fingers down towards that auger maybe, and or get a spoon or something in there to kind of get those out of them. You can also use your shop vac to get that last little bit. So what we did is removed this guy right here. Took the two screws out, pulled it forward, and then kind of worked it back in through that slot. Now we've got the electronics out of there. We can take out these 4 screws, 2 in the front, 2 over in the back, and the hopper is going to be taken off. Okay, 4 screws are taken off, so now all we have to do is just pull that hopper right off. So there we go. And that's all there is to the electronics. Got leaves in there, and you can see a few pellets there in the auger. This is something that we'll clean up. Those are pretty dirty, but we can clean all this up, make it all look good. This is your auger motor right here. So this is what turns the auger. It's okay for this to have a little bit of play, that way it doesn't bind up. So sometimes you folks are irritated about that, but that's not a problem. And then down in the bottom here, you've got a main fan. So this main fan is what blows through the tunnel and kind of feeds your burn pot. So down inside the burn pot, you see where there's little holes here. That's where the air comes from, is it comes from that main fan. So that's really the electronics. It's the main fan, it's the auger, and it's the controller. And I guess you also do have the temperature probe that sits inside here. So that's what kind of monitors the temperature, and the controller then adjusts the feed pellets when it's needed. So you can see where I kind of scraped that all clean on the inside, and if this is just your kind of periodic cleaning for your own personal use, that's all you need to do. What we're actually going to do on this one is I'm going to remove the lid. There's 2 screws over on this side, 2 screws on that side to be able to pull that off. And when you do, just make sure you kind of take into consideration this little bracket here. And we're going to take that off. We're going to remove the handle. There's just a bolt on the inside here for the handle. There's the Traeger badge. We're going to remove that. There's just on the back side here, you can kind of see these little rings right here. You can just kind of pop those off and get some new ones to put on there. Those are just kind of retainers. And then you can see our temperature gauge here. We're just going to remove that as well. And that's just a simple little bolt there. Just put a crescent wrench on there to take that off. We'll clean that up. We'll clean this whole top up, and I'm going to repaint this as well. Okay, so got those unscrewed so these little guys can come out, and those are just little retainers. Be a little bit careful because this lid is not secured in any way right now. So we're just going to pick that up, lift it off, and I'm going to put it on this little makeshift workbench that I'm going to use to kind of clean it up. Okay, this is the inside of the lid. We're going to take a few things off here and just use a crescent wrench. If your grill has an exterior thermometer, just kind of loosen that up, unscrew, and that comes off pretty easy. So do that, kind of wiggle that, and out that comes. So that's one thing. And then a 7/16 is going to get at the inside of this right here to be able to take the handle off. And same thing over here. Here we've got a washer, and now the handle is removed. Toughest thing that I usually find is getting at these little guys right here. So these are the little retainers for that Traeger emblem. And what I do is I get at those with a pick and just try to get underneath there to get those guys kind of loosened up. And then once you get them loosened up, you can get in there with just kind of work on those a little bit. And you see where that just kind of came right off there. Picked up some extra ones of those, so I've got those around. They just kind of snap back in, so it makes it easy to be able to paint without having to mask around that logo, that's for sure. There we go. So now that Traeger logo is off, and we are ready to do one more thing, which is just going to be to take a screwdriver to get this off. Put a little socket on the back side there. But then you'll be ready to kind of clean that up and get it ready for paint. Cleaned out the insides from Harbor Freight. Got a set of these guys and they worked out great. Scraped the insides out, suck it up with the trusty shop vac, gets it all clean, ready to go. So one thing I wanted to point out is that inside of the grill, I don't use anything that could possibly be harmful. You're cooking food inside of there, so I don't want to introduce anything that could be harmful to anybody. So what I use is an easy off if I'm cleaning inside, and I just pick this up at local grocery stores or Walmart also, but nothing is any kind of chemicals or any paint on the inside of it. Just use that big wide putty knife and just kind of scrape all the chunks out of there and clean it up as best you can. Sometimes you don't want to do too good of a job because you don't want to, you see where there's kind of a nice seal that's developed along the bottom here to the edge, and you don't want to get rid of too much of that because that takes a long time to develop, but you definitely want to get rid of some of that crusty stuff that's on there. So here's the tools that I use to clean up the outside. It's just a wire wheel here, and this is on an angle grinder from Harbor Freight. Also, sometimes I'll go in and use one of these flapper wheels if I really need to get deep down and scrape off everything, and these work out pretty good. This is a 60 grit, they go up to about 120, and those will clean really well. After I get that done, I go over with a rust dissolver. So this is a Rust-Oleum rust dissolver, and I found this on Amazon. Works out really well, kind of comes out in a gel, and I'll use a toothbrush to be able to kind of make sure that I get a good even coat of that, and that helps me kind of clean up the outside and make sure that it mitigates any rust that might be hiding. Take a look for any bubbles that you might have in the surface where it kind of shows that there's rust underneath the paint, and make sure you hit that with that wire wheel and clean it up and get some of that rust dissolver on. So we're going to start the cleanup on this, and I've got an angle grinder here, and it's got a wire wheel on there with a wire brush. You can see that I've got eye protection on here. I'm also going to put this N95 mask so that way I'm not going to be breathing in all these little bits of rust and metal and stuff that are going to be flying around. So just going to show you how it's done. So here you can see where there's kind of that rust is still pretty deep in there. I think I might actually take a flapper wheel to that to kind of clean that a little bit. But you can see here where there's some of that powder coat. Was still in pretty good shape and still adhered, so I didn't grind all that. But over all the way to the edge here, that powder coat was in pretty bad shape and just kind of flaked off. So I did a good job of cleaning that up. So here I used a 120 grit flapper wheel, and that's what it looks like. And this was from Harbor Freight. Use that to really get down to the bare metal on there, so you can do that is one option. And then I'm going to also show you with some of the rust dissolver kind of what that does. Something else I do want to mention about using that rust reformer, make sure you're wearing some gloves. I just use the Harbor Freight 5mm disposable gloves, because that stuff, if you get any kind of like a little cut or a nick or anything in your hand, you will feel it. So I put the rust reformer on, gave it about 5 minutes, did a little kind of quick wipe down of it, put another coat on, and you can see where it's really kind of doing its thing and cleaning that up. Really sold on this stuff. And make sure you use it in all these little cracks and crevices, so you can see right in here. I always make sure I kind of go down in there, all across any seams, because you can find some nasty rust that'll kind of show up in there, and even some other areas. I'll put it along the top here because you may have a little bit of rust just kind of starting that's hard to see, but that really cleans it up and does a good job. So definitely sold on this stuff. You can just kind of wipe it off. You see where that rust just really disappeared. So pretty great stuff. Just want to make sure you get it all cleaned off before you start in with your priming and painting. So we've got that all sanded down with a wire wheel, and then added that rust dissolver onto it. You can see where it's working and doing its thing. Also put a little bit underneath here, because anywhere you get kind of drips going down, you want to make sure you get that covered pretty well. So this is going to turn out great. Then we're just going to wash it up and clean all that off and get in there for primer. So here's a photo showing the before. Notice where all that rust is down the bottom. It's pretty nasty, and we really need to get rid of that. So I used the rust dissolver and smeared it on. In this case, I made sure to put some gloves on and smeared it on with a rag, and that way I could completely cover all these really rusty areas. In this second photo, you can see the results of it. You can see where that rust is completely gone. So I like to clean up a lot of these little nuts and bolts and everything with just to make sure that we put some rust dissolver on those to clean them up. So grab a coffee cup, or cut off a little plastic container of some kind, cut the top off of it so you can put all those things in there, and then I just spray some of this rust dissolver down inside and make sure you kind of give a little liberal coat in there, and just kind of shake it around a little bit, and we're going to put some more in there and let it marinate in there for a little bit, and that'll take good care of it. So after I've used that Rust-Oleum rust dissolver, I make sure and clean it off really well. I'll use water on there to kind of clean it up in the areas that aren't really an issue getting wet. Don't want to get that into the electronics or anything. And then I've used this stuff right here, this Oxygen Orange. They say it's awesome. It says it's awesome. And it's pretty awesome stuff. It really helps kind of clean up the outside. So I use that to make sure that I don't have any residual on there. So we've got the rust dissolver that we've coated a lot of this with to kind of get rid of that rust. We've cleaned it off with a garden hose, and now we're just going to kind of give it a little bit of time in the sunshine to dry off. Here is that lid with all the components removed off of it. Notice that the edges are where you really get rust, so that's where I really hit those pretty heavy with a wire wheel, and then hit it with a rust dissolver also. So we just want to make sure that that's all cleaned up and dry before we put any of our primer paint on. So we're in good shape. So here's the handle. You can see where it's got kind of some nastiness on there, and just kind of lots of barbecue love over the years. So what we're going to do is just use a little bit of warm water, a little bit of Dawn, and this little abrasive pad right here, and just kind of scrub that up and clean it up. It'll look like new. Okay, I'm just working on the painting. So I did the primer coat, which is the rust containment also plus primer, and I put that down first on every bit of metal, especially in areas where we've had rust that we've mitigated. And then on the exterior, I make sure and get a good coat of this Rust-Oleum rust resolver. So what this does is kind of encapsulates any rust in there, gives a good primer also, and I find that stuff on Amazon. And then what we're going to do is use a high heat paint. You can see the Krylon over on the left, just kind of a satin black. This works out really well. I think I picked this up at Lowe's or Home Depot. That works out well. I've also used this VHT very high temperature engine enamel. This is an orange one that I used for one of the tops, and then here's a red one that I used also. So that's a caliper paint, but again, these are for high heat, so they work out really good to be able to paint both the lids of a grill, and also have done the tops of the hoppers, and also just the little cap on the top of the smokestack. So here's the paint that I'm working on with this one. It's the High Heat Max, the satin black Krylon, and you can see this little handle that I use. So somebody else tipped me off on this on a Traeger group, and he said that he uses this and it makes it a lot easier. I found the same. I don't get a little black finger from pressing on the button to be able to release the paint, so it's a lot smoother to put the paint on, a lot easier to handle. And I think I picked these up on Amazon. I got like 4 or 6 or 8 of them for like 10 bucks, and I think it gives me a much better coat of paint when I go to lay the paint down. Much more comfortable because I can grip it with my whole hand as opposed to just the finger, and really does a great job. I'm really impressed by these. So here's actually putting some of the paint down. It's super smooth to be able to use this handle, as I said. Really changed it up for me. So I really like these, and well worth the investment. You can take them off when you're done and put them on the next can. So they'll last you a long time. Gotta prop something in there to kind of hold that open. That way you can get all the different edges and all the way around it, especially that little area right up on the top here. If you have it propped open, that works out really well. So it's time to paint all the little pieces of hardware. I got all the rust off of them, and I punched little holes in a piece of cardboard and just push these all in, so that way I can hold them all together, and then take those hinges and just kind of drop them on the top there, and makes a good way to be able to paint them without having to touch all of them, and holds them just where they need to be to dry. So here's the main body of the grill after it's all painted, and I think this came out really good. Again, I used that rust inhibitor first, and then use the high heat paint afterwards. You'll note that I didn't paint anything inside. Strictly on the outside is where I painted, because I don't want to get anything, any kind of chemicals, paint, anything inside where the food is being prepared. And next we're going to put the Traeger logo back on, so that goes right in here. You see these little retainers, little tiny things, and they're just going to go back over top of these little posts right here. So you can see that post that it goes on top of. I am going to put a dab of JB Weld like right in here. So I've mixed that up and I've got that ready to go, and that'll just kind of hold it in position. And there we go. So this one's all put down to bed for the night. I've got the hopper put back in place, and the handle's on, the top's on the lid. So tomorrow I'll just have to work on the legs, kind of fix where those wheels are situated. They're in the wrong direction, and then clean up and paint those legs, put the electronics back together, and we're ready to go. So I hope that the information that I've given you on how to do the work, and also some of the tools that I use, some of the different chemicals, the type of paint that I use, will help you out as you take a Traeger that you found that maybe needs a little bit attention, and bring it back to life. So good luck and have fun with it.